Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 343, Your Victory Over Distrust, Part 1. How Trust Deals with the Knowledge Gap Manipulated by Distrust. The podcast objectives are: reveal the only way you can eliminate distrust, analyze the knowledge gap in our battles with distrust, and analyze the purpose of trust. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The only way to eliminate distrust. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to Day 85 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we executed a high-level overview of trust, the focal degree of faith, and a very prominent degree of holiness. Like hope, there is much more I could say about trust, and yet I must move forward with my remit. To wit, I must continue showing you how you can wield the power of faith to defeat doubt at the detailed level. And now it's time for us to deal with distrust. We should start by recapping everything we learned about trust in the most recent podcast. The primary objective of trust is to have complete confidence in the Father to the point where we follow his will always, specifically when we lack understanding. By definition, trust is assurance in the integrity and surety of a person or thing based upon limited knowledge. Now, within this summary lies the most challenging aspect of your battles with distrust. Vis-a-vis, there is a knowledge gap within the degree of trust, and consequently, an understanding gap within the process of thought generation. And although this may be a weakness for some, it will be a great strength for those of us who are true contenders for holiness and the seal of Elohim. As for the former, these are frightened by their lack of knowledge and understanding, for it is similar to walking in the dark. Elohim is with us, and he is for us, and yet it will still feel like we are walking in the dark. For that reason, these individuals will turn back and fall into a place of despair, which will manipulate their emotions, causing them to fear. This, in turn, will cause them to act irrationally by making a false move. Consider this and be advised. When these false believers are forced to walk a certain stretch of their path in darkness, they will become irrational and lean to their own understanding as opposed to the unlimited expanse of knowledge and wisdom of the Spirit of Elohim. Now, here again, this speaks to the irrational nature of fear and the danger of allowing your emotions to be a major player or a heavy hitter in any of your thought processes, specifically when your emotions are being manipulated by despair. Likewise, this matter also speaks to the danger of yourself. Alas, self is not only destroying the race of man in our times, but he is also the same villain who led Lucifer to his demise. Consider this: Lucifer's rebellion was initiated by his false impression that he could be as the Most High, an impression his mind could have only generated if he had developed an overinflated, inaccurate view of himself and his role in the kingdom of heaven. And this faulty perspective, my friends, is the primary derivative of the evolution of yourself. Now, although this speaks to the great danger posed by self, we must remember where we are at in our quest for holiness and this war over our mind. To wit, by mastering hope, we have defeated despair and reversed all the damage he has done. And thus, we have eliminated self from our thought dimension. He is now a defeated foe. This is where trust comes in, and why mastering trust will not be as difficult as you may have thought, considering there are gaps within your knowledge and understanding at this juncture. It is for the following reason, which I will offer as an inflection point. Once you eliminate yourself, your emotions cannot be manipulated, and thus you will not readily begin to fear or manifest any of your most violent or irrational emotions in distressing situations. Quite the contrary, you, my friend, will manifest one of your more peaceful and rational emotions. For example, composure. In this order, hope forms a barrier within your mind that prevents distrust from permeating any of the mental faculties within its spiritual jurisdiction. For hope is even more powerful than distrust. This forces distrust to operate on the periphery of your mind, i.e., an enclosed location where he is locked in. And this is exactly where trust wants him. Here is why. Every degree of holiness is superior to their corresponding degrees of lawlessness. Therefore, distrust cannot defeat trust on a neutral playing field. The same way despair can do nothing with hope. My dear friends, this is why it is so crucial for hope to establish a boundary within your mind, for this will force distrust to go to war with trust in an environment where he has no advantage and opportunity to flee the battle. On the contrary, distrust must fight the battle with trust head on. And after he loses, he will be eliminated from your thought dimension once and for all. Trust is a mental bridge. Now, like the battle between hope and despair, the battle between trust and distrust is also brilliantly fascinating. Recall how I stated there are knowledge and understanding gaps within your thought dimension. In times past, distrust manipulated these gaps to cause you to fear. Like despair, distrust likes to use this particular emotion. And because yourself was the governing force within your thought dimension, these gaps were never addressed. Quite the contrary, they remained fixed within your thought dimension, forcing you to have a broken and defeated mind. But look here, this is where trust comes in. To it, upon the elimination of yourself and the institution of a renewed personality, you are no longer deceived into embracing these gaps. You are no longer inclined to allow distrust to manipulate these gaps, to limit and control your mind. Quite the contrary. From now, you address these gaps. You tackle them head on. On this wise, trust is a mental bridge. Its purpose is to eliminate each knowledge and understanding gap within your mind. To it, when you don't have the complete picture concerning how something is going to happen, you don't panic. You don't turn to your most violent and irrational emotions, expecting them to lead you down a path that is good. Quite the contrary. When you learn how to trust in the Father, His Spirit will create a mental bridge that fills in the knowledge gaps for you. To be clear, this mental bridge does not necessarily answer the question, at least not completely, i.e., this mental bridge does not reveal to you in a detailed fashion how the Father will indeed bring His good will to pass in your life. If you recall, the how factor is the output of your planning zone, which is in the motor region of your left brain. To it, it is the final phase in the process of thought generation and the least critical to the generation of an informed thought. In effect, understanding how Yahuwah will fulfill His purpose in your life is not nearly as important as understanding what His will is and why. Not only this, but understanding how the Most High will fulfill His will is not nearly as important as us taking the first step of execution and doing His will as we know and understand it in its currency. We see this example play itself out repeatedly throughout the scriptures. One of the more powerful occasions is found in the Gospel of Luke, in which Yahushua, Messiah, cleanses 10 lepers. And we will analyze this story in the next podcast. Now, here is the final word. The truth is, we will never grow if our focus is on what we know. My dear friends, this is not only a lesson you must receive concerning trust and faith. This is a lesson you must receive concerning every degree of holiness. Trust me, for as faith is the most pervasive degree of holiness, and trust is at its core, we will spend most of our days in the quest of holiness, operating with some form of a knowledge deficit. Here again, this is by design, and this design is to ensure that your faith stays strong. For as faith is the foundation of holiness, those who don't stay strong in their faith won't stay long. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if He has not convicted you, or if you had not heard Him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word of truth you have heard. Specifically, I want you to meditate on any situation in your life that can only be resolved by trust, and ask yourself the following question. Do I truly trust in the Father that He will bring His goodwill to pass? Do I truly believe He will keep His promise? If you answered yes, that's great. But be advised, these knowledge gaps will not quickly go away. They never do. And this is by design. And thus, I encourage you to add patience to your trust. For unless he reveals it to us, we never truly know when his will should come to pass. And yet, those who wait on Yahuwah will renew their strength, and they will inherit the promise at last. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 343, Your Victory Over Distrust, Part 1. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 344, Your Victory Over Distrust, Part 2. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.